This woman named Cindy swore her male best friend was just a friend. Her boyfriend believed her. Her friends believed her. But when her best friend made his move one drunken night, everything she'd been hiding came crashing down, and she lost absolutely everything. The worst part? She still thinks she's the victim. I'm Emma, and today on Mrs. Emma, I'm bringing you a story that will make you question everything you know about friendship boundaries and relationship honesty. Buckle up, because this one is wild. Cindy was 25 years old when her entire world fell apart. She had been dating Austin for about a year, and they'd recently moved in together. He worked at a warehouse handling shipping and receiving, nothing flashy but steady work that covered the rent. Cindy worked part-time at a wellness center doing facials and skincare treatments, which gave her the flexibility she loved and enough income to feel independent. When Cindy met Austin, she thought she'd hit the jackpot. He had a bit of a reputation as a player before they got together, which actually made her feel special. Out of all the women he could have chosen, he chose her. He settled down for her. From the very beginning, Austin seemed eager to prove he was different now that his player days were behind him. He was accommodating, trusting, maybe even too trusting if we're being honest. But there was one major complication in their relationship from day one. Greg. Greg had been Cindy's best friend for 4 years, ever since they met in college. He worked in sales, made excellent money, drove an expensive car, and had that confident, successful energy that some people just radiate. To Cindy, Greg was irreplaceable. He'd been there for her through terrible breakups, family chaos, work drama, and every crisis in between. According to Cindy, Greg was the kind of friend who actually listened. He gave solid advice when she needed it. When other guys in her life would vanish the moment things got messy, Greg stayed. He never judged her choices, never made her feel inadequate. She valued that friendship deeply. From the very first day, Cindy made sure Austin knew about Greg. She laid it out clearly. Greg was important to her, and he wasn't going anywhere. Austin said he understood. He said he trusted her and respected her friendships. He seemed mature about the whole thing. At least that's what Cindy believed. As the months went by, Cindy started noticing changes in Austin's behavior. He'd get this particular look on his face whenever she mentioned Greg, like he was analyzing something, calculating something in his mind. It bothered her. She felt like she was constantly walking on eggshells, carefully choosing her words so Austin wouldn't get the wrong idea. Meanwhile, her friendship with Greg remained as comfortable as ever. They could talk about anything, joke around, be completely themselves without any pretense. That freedom felt important to Cindy, especially as things with Austin started feeling more restrictive. Cindy suggested that Austin and Greg should meet properly. She figured if Austin actually spent time with Greg, he'd see their friendship for what it really was. Completely platonic, and all his weird paranoia would disappear. Austin seemed excited about the idea initially. He talked about wanting to know the important people in Cindy's life. But then the questions started. What did you and Greg talk about today? How long were you at coffee with him? Did he text you back yet? At first, Cindy thought Austin was just showing interest in her day, but the questions became more frequent. His tone shifted from curious to investigative. Cindy started feeling defensive because she wasn't doing anything wrong. Greg was her friend. Of course they communicated regularly. That's what friends do. She also noticed Austin monitoring her phone usage. He'd make comments about how much time she spent texting, but when he texted his own friends or coworkers, that was perfectly acceptable. The double standard frustrated her immensely. They finally arranged a dinner at a casual downtown restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a comfortable place where the three of them could sit down and get to know each other. Cindy was genuinely excited. She believed that once Austin met Greg face to face, all his insecurities would melt away. Cindy picked out a cute outfit. Nothing too dressy, but nice enough to feel confident. Austin seemed nervous when they arrived, which she found endearing. They grabbed a table and waited. When Greg walked in, Cindy stood up to greet him with a hug. Completely normal friend behavior. But she noticed Austin watching their interaction with intense focus, like he was searching for hidden meanings in every gesture. Right from the start, Greg did something that set the tone for the entire evening. He compared his height to Austin's. Greg stood around 6'2", noticeably taller than Austin's 5'9" frame. Greg actually put his hand on his own head and moved it over to demonstrate the height difference, making some joke about the gap. Cindy laughed because that was typical Greg. Always a little competitive, always showing off. Throughout dinner, Greg dominated the conversation. He told elaborate stories, shared strong opinions on various topics, and had something to contribute to every subject Austin brought up. Greg was articulate and knowledgeable, qualities Cindy genuinely admired about him. He wasn't afraid to disagree with Austin or offer alternative perspectives. But Cindy could see Austin growing more frustrated with each passing minute. Every time Greg contradicted him or expanded on one of his points, Austin's jaw would tighten. His body language became increasingly rigid. What really bothered Cindy was how Austin kept watching her. When she laughed at Greg's jokes or agreed with something he said, Austin would give her this look. Not quite angry, but definitely taking mental notes. It made her self-conscious about acting natural with her friend. She found herself being more reserved than usual with Greg, which felt unfair to both of them. At one point, Greg complimented Cindy's outfit, saying the color looked great on her. A simple, friendly comment. The kind of thing friends say to each other constantly. But Austin's entire demeanor changed. He reached over and put his arm around Cindy in this possessive, territorial way that felt completely forced and uncomfortable. On the drive home, Austin stayed quiet. Then the interrogation began. Did you notice how Greg looked at you? Did you think Greg's comments were appropriate? Did you see how he kept trying to one-up me during every conversation? Cindy tried explaining that Greg was just being himself, that Austin was reading way too much into normal social interaction. But Austin wasn't buying it. He said Greg was obviously interested in her romantically and was being disrespectful to their relationship. The argument escalated quickly and intensely. Austin said he was uncomfortable with Cindy spending time alone with Greg anymore. He said Greg clearly didn't respect boundaries and was probably just waiting for his opportunity to make a move. Cindy was furious. Austin was asking her to change a friendship that had been perfectly healthy for years, all because of his own insecurities. Eventually, just to end the fight, Cindy told Austin what he wanted to hear. She said she'd try to put some distance between herself and Greg. She said she understood his concerns and would be more mindful about boundaries. But honestly, she was just saying it to make him stop arguing. She didn't actually believe she should have to change a healthy friendship because her boyfriend couldn't handle it. In her mind, Greg hadn't done anything wrong, and neither had she. Austin's jealousy was his problem to deal with, not hers. After making that promise to Austin, Cindy found herself in an impossible position. Greg kept texting her normally, and she felt terrible ignoring him or giving short responses. He'd been nothing but a loyal friend. Suddenly, she was supposed to treat him like a stranger? So Cindy started responding to Greg's messages when Austin wasn't around. Not because she was being sneaky, she told herself, but because she didn't want to hurt Greg's feelings or make him think he'd done something wrong. Greg eventually noticed Cindy was acting differently and asked if everything was okay. She ended up confiding in him about Austin's concerns and her promise to create distance. Greg was understanding at first. He said he didn't want to cause problems in her relationship. But then Greg started saying things that resonated deeply with Cindy. He mentioned how Austin seemed controlling and insecure at dinner. He said those traits usually get worse over time, not better. He told her he'd watched other friends go through similar situations where their partners slowly isolated them from their support systems. It made Cindy question whether Austin's behavior was really about protecting their relationship or about controlling who she could be friends with. She started meeting Greg for coffee occasionally when Austin was at work, just quick meetups at cafes near her workplace. Nothing secretive or romantic. They'd discuss normal friend stuff, his dating life, work drama, family updates. He'd ask how things were going with Austin, and Cindy would vent about feeling like she was constantly walking on eggshells. Greg was incredibly supportive during these conversations. He'd validate her feelings and remind her that she deserved to be in a relationship where she felt trusted and respected. Cindy knew she should tell Austin about these meetups, but she also knew he'd blow them completely out of proportion. They were innocent friend conversations. She didn't want to deal with another interrogation about every word and gesture. The texting between Greg and Cindy returned to normal frequency too. They'd send memes, share work stories, complain about random frustrations. It felt good to have that outlet again because Austin had become so serious and tense about everything. Greg started making comments about how stressed Cindy seemed lately and how Austin's behavior was affecting her happiness. He wasn't wrong. She had been feeling anxious and restricted at home. Greg would point out how she used to be more carefree and spontaneous before Austin started monitoring her friendships. Sometimes Greg would suggest that Cindy deserved better. He'd say things like, "You shouldn't have to hide your friendships from your boyfriend," or "A real man would trust you completely." Meanwhile, Austin thought everything was fine because Cindy wasn't openly hanging out with Greg anymore. He'd comment on how much calmer their relationship felt and how glad he was they'd worked through their issues. The irony was thick. Cindy was still talking to Greg regularly. She'd just gotten better at being discreet about it. She felt guilty about the deception, but she also felt justified. In her mind, she wasn't actually doing anything wrong. She was just maintaining a friendship that Austin had unreasonably asked her to end. But there was something else too. Something Cindy barely admitted to herself. Having this secret felt kind of exciting. Not because anything inappropriate was happening, but because it felt like she was reclaiming some control over her own life. Austin had been making her feel like she couldn't be trusted to manage her own relationships. Proving him wrong felt empowering in a strange way. The conversations with Greg were getting more personal as well. He'd share intimate details about his dating life and ask for advice about women he was interested in. Cindy would tell him about her frustrations with Austin and get perspective on relationship dynamics. The night that destroyed everything started out completely innocent, at least in Cindy's mind. Greg had been going through serious stress at work. His manager was being difficult, and he was wrestling with the decision of whether to stick it out or start looking for a new job. He'd been texting Cindy about it all week, and she could tell he was really struggling. On Friday evening, Greg asked if she wanted to come over to his apartment for drinks and just decompress about the work situation. This is where Cindy made a choice that would change everything. She told Austin she was going to hang out with her coworker Maria for a girls' night. It wasn't a huge lie, she reasoned, just a small one to avoid an unnecessary fight about something completely innocent. Austin seemed fine with it. He said to have fun and be safe. He was planning to watch some game on television anyway, so he wasn't particularly interested in what she was doing. Cindy arrived at Greg's apartment around 7 in the evening. He had a nice bottle of wine opened and some cheese and crackers arranged. His place always felt more sophisticated than the apartment she shared with Austin. Better furniture, nicer decorations, just more mature overall. Greg had changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a casual button-down shirt that looked really good on him, though Cindy barely allowed herself to notice. They settled on his couch and started talking about his work drama. Greg was genuinely frustrated and needed someone to listen while he processed his thoughts out loud. As they talked, Greg kept complimenting how insightful Cindy was, how much he valued her opinion. He said she was one of the few people who really understood him and could give honest feedback. It felt incredible to be appreciated for her thoughts instead of constantly questioned about her motives like she was with Austin. The conversation gradually shifted from work stress to more personal topics. Greg started talking about how lonely he'd been feeling lately and how difficult it was to find someone who truly understood him. Greg also started making comments about Austin. He said Austin didn't seem to appreciate what he had. He said things like how lucky Austin was to have someone so loyal and understanding, and how not every guy would be able to handle having a girlfriend as independent and confident as Cindy. The compliments felt wonderful, especially since she'd been feeling pretty unappreciated at home lately. Cindy was drinking more wine than she usually did, partly because it was really good wine and partly because she was enjoying the relaxed atmosphere. Greg moved closer to her on the couch as they talked. She didn't think anything of it at first. They'd always been physically comfortable around each other. Hugs, sitting close during movies, that kind of normal friend stuff. But as the evening progressed, Cindy started noticing how he was looking at her, how the space between them kept shrinking. He started touching her arm when he made points during conversation. At one point, he brushed some hair away from her face when she was laughing at something he said. The turning point came when Greg started talking about how much their friendship meant to him and how he couldn't imagine his life without her in it. He said she brought out the best in him and made him want to be a better person. Then he said something that should have sent alarm bells ringing. He mentioned how he sometimes wondered what would have happened if they'd met at a different time before she was with Austin. Cindy should have recognized where this was heading. She should have redirected the conversation. But honestly, she was feeling really flattered and emotionally connected to him in that moment. When Greg leaned in to kiss her, part of her saw it coming. but she was still shocked when it actually happened. Cindy pulled back immediately and told him that wasn't okay, that she was with Austin, that they were just friends. Greg apologized right away and said he'd misread the situation, that he thought there was something between them. He said he respected her relationship, but then he started saying other things. He said he could see she wasn't really happy with Austin. He said they had a connection that was deeper than what she had with her boyfriend. Cindy was drunk and confused and had no idea how to handle the situation. Part of her was flattered that Greg had feelings for her, but she also felt betrayed because she'd thought their friendship was genuine. Now it seemed like he'd had ulterior motives all along. She told him she needed to leave and started gathering her things. Greg followed her to the door, trying to convince her to stay and talk things through. He said they didn't have to pretend anymore. He said she obviously had feelings for him too, or she wouldn't have come over. When Cindy insisted on leaving, Greg became more persistent. He said she was making a mistake, that she was running back to someone who didn't appreciate her. He actually followed her outside, still trying to convince her they belonged together. Cindy had to raise her voice and tell him firmly to back off before he finally stopped following her. Sitting in her car, drunk and upset, Cindy made a choice. She called Austin, asking him to come get her because she didn't feel safe driving. She was crying and probably not making much sense, just saying that Greg had tried to kiss her and she needed to come home. When Austin arrived and she got in his car, still emotional and shaken, he asked what happened. Cindy told him that Greg had tried to kiss her out of nowhere and that she'd rejected him and left immediately. Austin was quiet for a moment. Then he asked a simple question that changed everything. "Why were you at Greg's place to begin with? I thought you were hanging out with Maria." That's when Cindy realized she'd been caught in her lie. She panicked. She tried to explain that she'd gone to help Greg with some work stress and that it was supposed to be completely innocent. But Austin's whole demeanor shifted when he realized she'd been lying about where she was. Suddenly, he wasn't even focused on Greg's behavior anymore. He was focused entirely on her deception. Austin drove home in complete silence while Cindy tried desperately to explain herself. She kept saying that nothing had happened until Greg tried to kiss her, and that she'd immediately shut it down and left. But Austin wasn't really listening to her explanations about Greg's behavior. He kept circling back to the same questions. Why had she lied about where she was going? Why was she hanging out with Greg after promising to distance herself? The next morning, Austin woke up with a completely different energy. He wasn't angry or emotional. He was calm and distant, which somehow felt so much worse. He made coffee and sat down across from Cindy at their kitchen table with this serious expression she'd never seen before. Austin started by saying he'd been thinking about everything that happened, and he had some things he needed to say. He wasn't yelling or being dramatic. He was just very matter-of-fact about the whole thing. Austin said the issue wasn't really about Greg trying to kiss her. It was about her lying and continuing to see Greg after promising she wouldn't. Cindy tried to interrupt and explain that she was just trying to be a good friend and that she hadn't expected anything to happen. But Austin held up his hand and said he needed to finish. He said that over the past few months he'd noticed changes in her behavior. He'd suspected she was still in contact with Greg despite her promises. Austin mentioned specific things Cindy had completely forgotten about. Times when she'd been secretive with her phone, occasions when she'd come home in a different mood after supposedly running errands, changes in how she talked about her day. He said he'd been giving her the benefit of the doubt, hoping his suspicions were wrong. But the previous night confirmed what he'd been afraid of. The worst part was how calm and reasonable Austin sounded. He wasn't attacking her or calling her names. He was just laying out facts and explaining how her actions had affected his trust in her. Cindy got defensive. She tried to explain that she'd only lied because she knew Austin would overreact and make a huge deal out of something innocent. She said she was trying to avoid unnecessary conflict while still being there for a friend who needed support. Austin just nodded and said he understood her reasoning, but that it didn't change the fact that she'd chosen to lie to him repeatedly. Then Austin said something that really caught her off guard. He said he'd been doing some reading about relationships and boundaries, and he'd realized he'd been trying to control her behavior instead of just deciding whether he could accept it or not. Austin told her he'd actually been thinking about their relationship for weeks, even before the previous night happened. He said he'd been feeling like he was constantly trying to prove himself worthy of her honesty and transparency. He was tired of feeling like he had to compete for his own girlfriend's respect and loyalty. The conversation lasted for hours, with Cindy trying different approaches to convince Austin to give her another chance. She promised to be completely transparent from now on, to cut off Greg entirely, to do whatever it took to rebuild his trust. But Austin kept saying the same thing. The problem wasn't what she was willing to do going forward. It was what she'd already chosen to do. Austin said he cared about her, but he couldn't stay in a relationship where he felt like he was being managed and deceived instead of loved and respected. He said she was free to maintain whatever friendships she wanted, but not while expecting him to pretend he was okay with being lied to about them. By the end of the conversation, Austin had made up his mind. He said he was going to pack some things and stay elsewhere while he figured out his next steps. He wasn't angry or vindictive about it. He just seemed resigned and disappointed. Austin packed a bag with some clothes and work items. He didn't slam doors or storm out dramatically. He just methodically gathered what he needed while Cindy followed him around, trying desperately to get him to engage with her. After Austin left, Cindy was devastated and angry and confused all at the same time. She felt like he was abandoning her when she needed support after being betrayed by Greg. She couldn't understand how her lying could possibly be worse than Greg's predatory behavior. In her mind, Austin was punishing her for being the victim of someone else's inappropriate actions. She reached out to mutual friends for support, expecting them to see how unreasonable Austin was being. But that's when things got even worse. Most of their friends either stayed neutral or actually seemed to side with Austin. Some admitted they'd noticed her being secretive about Greg and had wondered what was going on. A few people said they thought Austin had been patient and understanding about the whole situation. Cindy felt completely betrayed by people she thought would automatically have her back. Over the next few weeks, she kept expecting Austin to cool down and want to work things out. She sent him texts apologizing and asking to talk. But his responses were polite, yet firm. He said he hoped she was doing well, but that he'd made his decision and needed space to move forward. It infuriated her how calm and resolved he seemed about throwing away their entire relationship over what she saw as a minor trust issue. Then she started seeing Austin around town, and he looked different. Not devastated like she'd expected, but actually more relaxed and confident than he'd seemed in months. She heard he'd gotten a promotion at work and was clearly thriving without her. It made her angry because she'd expected him to realize what he'd lost and come crawling back. Instead, he seemed genuinely happy to be free of their relationship drama. The final blow came when Cindy found out through social media that Austin was dating someone new. She was a woman from his workplace who Cindy had always thought was kind of plain and boring. But in the pictures they posted together, Austin looked genuinely happy and peaceful in a way he rarely had with Cindy. What really got to her was seeing how their friends and family responded to the new relationship. Everyone seemed genuinely excited for Austin and welcoming to his new girlfriend. They were getting invited to things together and being treated like a real couple right from the start. It made Cindy realize that people had probably seen her relationship with Austin as dramatic and unstable, which felt like a huge betrayal. Now Cindy is stuck dealing with the aftermath of what she still believes was Austin's inability to handle a normal friendship between a man and woman. She lost her boyfriend, several mutual friends, and the comfortable life they'd built together. She's back to living with roommates and trying to rebuild her social circle from scratch. The worst part, in her mind, is that everyone acts like she was the problem when all she did was try to maintain an important friendship while managing an insecure boyfriend's jealousy. Cindy still doesn't believe she was the problem. She thinks she's not perfect, but doesn't deserve to have her entire life turned upside down because two men couldn't handle their emotions like adults. In her view, Austin gave up on them way too easily, and Greg destroyed their friendship by making it weird. Both of them left her to deal with the consequences of their poor choices, and somehow she's the one who ended up alone. But here's what I think, and I want you to really consider this. Sometimes we can be so convinced we're right that we can't see the damage we're causing. Sometimes the person we think is being unreasonable is actually just setting healthy boundaries. And sometimes, when everyone around us is saying the same thing, maybe it's time to look in the mirror instead of pointing fingers. What do you think? Was Cindy just trying to maintain a friendship? Or did she cross lines that shouldn't have been crossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear your perspective on this one. If this story made you think, hit that like button. Share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Mrs. Emma so you never miss another story like this. These real-life situations teach us so much about relationships, boundaries, and self-awareness. Until next time, this is Emma reminding you to always be honest with yourself and the people you love. Trust me, the truth might be uncomfortable, but lies are so much more destructive. Take care, everyone.